And to give you a background on the water school, many years ago, when the Flow Partnership started its work across, especially in India with Rajendra Singh, looking at community-driven, community methods of water management and how communities are, using traditional wisdom or modern wisdom, but communities have their ways of holding water in the landscape. We realized very early on that those kind of methods are absolutely gold dust for communities across the world. And they would benefit from learning from each other and even seeing what other communities are doing on their own, with their own power and their own wisdom, not depending on others but themselves. So in India, of course, it's a very celebrated example of Rajendra reviving many rivers. And then across the world, as Water School developed, we found that there were many methods across Europe, different countries in Africa, different countries in Latin America. And so a couple of years ago, we started what was called the Water School. So with the idea and the thought and the hope that we would make these, record and make available these community methods for communities globally to see, understand, and potentially replicate and amplify in their own regions. So as part of that, then we started a focus on where you have, in which part of the world there is a huge amount of work that potentially is already happening and could be needed. And we found that with colleagues in Africa that there is enormous amount of really fantastic work with communities going on in the water and soil space. And we started Water School Africa with my colleagues John and others, and slowly developed it over a period of time, inviting communities from different parts of Africa to present their work. So we've had about 7 or 8 community presentations so far, all of them very rich and and teaching us a lot. And the sessions always run through with the community presenting, with the representative presenting, talking about the methods they've used, the success, and then we go into a discussion after that. So, and the discussion is open for everybody to ask questions, to know what to do, to connect with each other. So this is a platform for us to really take this work forward. I can now see our speakers joining in. It's possible that he could make it. John, would you like to, my colleague John from Zimbabwe, John, would you like to add something to this?
No, I think you've said it all. I think we should get on with the presentation. Yes. I think that would be great.
So I'm trying to admit Isaac in, but I think he's finding it a struggle. So Colin, may I request you, I'll introduce Colin. Colin is the chair of Tiyeni, the organization that is presenting today. Tiyeni has been working in Malawi since 2004, and they have worked with Malawian farmers and looked at the local, the soil and the ground over there over the last few years, and developed a system of farming called the deep bed method of farming, which I will, of course, let them tell you more about. But Colin and I met a few months ago, and we were speaking together at a soil summit, and we had most interesting conversations around soil and water and which comes first and which comes second, or do they go together. And then we subsequently met back in the UK, as both of us live here in the UK, and we realized very quickly that there is enormous value in placing what Tiyeni is doing, bringing that method to people across Africa and see how they would like to, learn from it and potentially take it on. So without further ado, may I introduce Colin? May I ask Colin to take on?
Hello.
And Colin, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for you joining in and taking over for Isaac, who I think is now here. Isaac,
hello. I'm now available.
Oh, very good. So, Colin, we'll hand the floor over to Isaac. But Isaac, if your connectivity gives issues, then you have Colin to take over from you.
All right, I am available now. I had challenges to connect.
Yes, we'll allow you to introduce yourself then, Isaac.
All right, my name is Isaac. Yeah, my name is Isaac Monjo Chavula. I'm the country director for Tiyeni. And I've been working with Tiyeni since 2016, and we have been testing this technology together with the farmers. Up to now, when we have the approval of the government, that's something which we are very proud of to have achieved. That now
Isaac,
farmers in Malawi can.
for a minute, Isaac, may I interrupt you for a minute? I wanted to check with you. Would you like us to show your slides, or are you going to be able to handle that at your end?
No, I show the slides because I'm using a phone.
Right. I'll share the screen and then
yeah, I'm just using a hand phone, which is a bit difficult for me to share the screen. But I would prefer if you could be showing the slides to the rest of the team, because I will be going through and then I will let you know that now you can change to the next slide.
Yes. Okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead with yes.
Yeah, so my background is that I have been to Agriculture College with the Masters in Extension and Rural Development, also Bachelor of Science in Agriculture Extension, and a Diploma in Agriculture Extension. So it's basically agriculture is what I am in terms of my work, as well as my background. So the first slide shows the presentation outline. And we are going to have something about Tiyeni organization in brief, and then the definition of deep bed farming, how deep beds are constructed, I will explain a bit, and then how water is harvested. That's where the main issue is. And then we'll talk also of the benefits of deep bed farming, the impacts and our success mix. In fact, I'll be explaining on how have we been so successful in the promotion of the deep bed farming, as well as share you the long-term goals. To begin with our next slide on Tiyeni organization, we are a Malawian organization. We are based here in Mzuzu, and then we are run as an NGO registered with the government and also affiliated to the NGO board, but also Kongoma, which is a body that is formed by NGOs. Our team is all Malawian and experts from the agricultural background, most of them, and we have a goal, a Tiyeni goal, that we are saying we need to reach out a level of acceptance with the deep bed farming being accepted throughout the country, and this will contribute to eradication of hunger and income poverty at household level, a goal that we are definitely going towards to achieve. And then we also want this deep bed farming to be integrated and embedded into agricultural practices throughout Malawi. In essence, our goal means that the whole country will be filled with farmers who are practicing deep bed farming and protecting their soils and managing their waters properly for their own benefit. We believe in that if we feed the soil, it will really feed us and we'll survive. Actually, we believe that the soil is all what we need to be properly managed, together with the water resources that we really need. So the technology that we have is known as deep bed farming, but what is it? We know that deep bed farming is a package. We have put together climate smart agricultural practices and technologies that actually the first thing is that we break the hardpan, which in most cases has been found to be reducing the yields of products or crops in Malawi. So after breaking the hardpan, then we configure the landscape to make sure that we harvest water and improve soil fertility in our practices. So this is like, in short, a way of managing our soils and water for our own benefit. So on this bed, deep bed farming, all the water that lands on that field will be staying there to benefit our crops and will be collected to make sure that it is kept in the soil and goes further to feed our water reservoirs or conserve water in a way and conserve soil to prevent loss of soil and its destructive nature as it goes and enters in the aquatic water bodies. So this deep bed farming is actually a way that we use to make sure that we maximize on yield, but properly managing our water and soils. So whatever happens in our field, we make sure that there is no loss of the water, no loss of soil. And what we are making on top of the soils is what keeps the soil to be rich and alive. So the next slide will explain on construction of planting beds. As you can see the picture, at this stage we have already used our line levels to make sure that we come up with a contour marker ridge, which I have shown, and then construction of beds follow to make sure that they are aligned to this marker ridge. We flatten the top because that's where we plant our crops and apply manure. The furrows are boxed to make sure that whatever water falls on these fields is trapped and remains there, to make sure that it goes into the soil as soil moisture, to make sure that our plants benefit and become more resilient even with the drought. And as you can see in our next slide, I will explain. But let's look at the beds that they are here. We see that the furrows are 50 centimeters apart. I mean, the width at the top is 50 centimeters, and the top of the bed is 100 centimeters. This is enough to plant several crops together. We may have maize for a maize-based agriculture, as Malawi has. We have two lines there which are about 75 centimeters apart, and making that from line to line it will be the same distance. But this can be done by tractor or by hand hoe. So it is compatible with mechanization. Some farmers mechanize, some farmers use the hand hoe. Then our next slide, please, to show how these beds are able to harvest water and keep the water for the benefit of the crops. You can see that in the next slide, where it is headed soon after heavy rains, what happens? Water gets harvested in the furrows, and then it infiltrates to make sure that it is kept in the soil for crops to benefit. And you can see the water that is in the furrows. Furrows are boxed, as I said, to make sure that there is no flow from one portion to the other to prevent any carrying of soil, solute or soil particles. So everything is expected to really get down into the soil. The next slide is showing a step further. You can see that the beds are planted to green maize. The furrows have harvested enough water to percolate and feed the soil with soil moisture available for crop production. So the deep beds will in this way control erosion and become very much useful in the case of keeping our soils, which are so important in the agricultural sector. And it is so important that the farmer keeps good soil which is in the field and never get lost. The next slide also emphasizes the significance of deep bed farming. In essence, what we have in this slide is not different from any hydrological cycle that is well known to most of us. But then what does the DBF contribute? We see that there is surface runoff taking place in any landscape that is where deep bed farming is cutting that sort of damage. Surface runoff is not needed in deep bed farming. And the second part,
we seem to have lost Isaac briefly. I think what he was saying is the second part of this slide shows infiltration with the red spotted star, and that's the difference between a traditional farmed area where there's no collection and percolation of the water, and hence the green hills, because all the water infiltrates that lands on a bed.
Yes, please, Colin,
continue
please
presenting,
continue.
and then if Isaac breaks back, I'll hand it back to him, if that's all right with you, Minnie.
Yes, please, Colin.
So if you go take to the next slide, please. So it's very obvious that the three great natural resources of farmers in Malawi and other countries in Southeastern Africa is water, the soil, and people, labor. And if we start with what happens if you don't collect that water, you don't just lose the water for then and for the future, because if it's in the ground, it will stay there for a long time, but you also lose your soil. And your soil is what your livelihood is dependent upon. So the method that Tiyeni has developed with farmers working on this, it took about 8 to 10 years to get to where we are now. And then Isaac arrived and improved some of the technological issues. So it wasn't just invented in 2004, it was developed with farmers and farming communities over a period of 10 years. What it's done in the areas where it's well received is it helps all the other land adjacent that isn't deep bed because of the water that's in the subsoil as a result. But the biggest difference is you don't see any water running downhill. And as I'm sure everyone knows, once water runs downhill, it has energy. And once it has that energy, it can tear the soil and carry it down to where it's not needed from where it's been desperately needed. Of course, we have a siltation problem, and Malawi's had these huge problems of siltation, where not only are crops covered with floods, with deposits of sediment which have destroyed the crops, but also got stuck into the rivers and closed down the hydroelectric power system, so that there was a power cut all over the country just because of silt. And they had to close it down, dig the silt out for 3 or 4 days. That silt would not be moving to anywhere near the extent if everyone did deep bed farming. So the key, and as you can imagine, if all the water that lands on the farms percolates, or nearly all of it percolates, you've got intermittent streams running for longer, you've got rivers maybe running for the whole year instead of part of the year, you've got wells fuller, you've got more water around. That vital, there's an expression in Malawi which is water is life. And that is so true, not just for drinking or cooking or washing, but also for all the other myriad of things, including our crops. So there's no question that this method, and actually the farmers say it, is they just say after starting the training, well, this is common sense. And I hear this expression a lot, which is that we're not doing anything hugely special. We're doing something which is obvious. So why isn't it done anywhere else? The other element is that when we've made these deep beds in the first year, I say we, the farmers, I consider myself a farmer. Unfortunately, I'm not out there with them, but I would love to be. When we make these, we have to break the hardpan, and the hardpan is prevalent all over Malawi, as discovered by the FAO. I've been to Zambia and Zimbabwe, and I've seen similar problems in the smaller areas I went to. This hardpan is desperate. It stops the water percolating through, it stops the roots percolating through, but worst of all, if you fluff up your beds and put your plants in and the water runs through on a slope to that hard pan, it works as a slip layer. You lose all your soil in places. So the bigger benefit of this is after the first year of breaking that hard soil and creating the deep beds, you never dig again. Those deep beds are the width so that you can do all your weeding and harvesting without stepping on the beds ever again. No compaction in the future. And therefore, in the first year, it's more work. That's the challenge. But thereafter, it's less work. Less work for more crops. You will find out in later slides just how much more the crops are coming from deep bed farming, which has made it such a success. So if we go to the next slide. So a key part of deep bed farming is a key part of farming everywhere in the world. And I'm preaching to the converted, I'm sure, compost and mulch. Compost is, of course, in itself, is not soil, it's compostable materials. And the importance of that is becoming more and more well known. The microorganisms in compost and in healthy soil. If you've got unhealthy soil, you add compost, and lo and behold, the little microbes and nematodes and all the other creatures and the fungi suddenly make that dirty soil, which isn't working very well, rich and full of life. And so it's a key part of deep bed farming, and it should be a key part of all other farming, that compost is included in the soil. Not just compost in terms of solid, but also compost teas. And the effect of this on the soil is to fluff it up. It gets a structure because of the fungi and the microbes and all the other creatures in that soil. And that structure increases the size of the root zone. That means that each plant has a bigger area to take its nutrients from. And of course, it exudes a bit of sugar into that to attract other fungi and bacteria. So it's a really complex thing that's going on underneath. But the simple thing is it builds soil health. The soil becomes healthier and the roots take advantage of that, and the crops increase in value, and not just in the weight of that crop, but also in the chemical balance, the micronutrients in that, because with a healthy soil, you've got roots that can collect micronutrients, which they wouldn't have been doing or would have more difficulty doing if that soil was plastered with artificial fertilizers and if there was still a hard pan, so the root zone was only quite shallow instead of deep. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about some challenges that farmers get in terms of pests.
Thanks, Colin. And I think I can see Isaac's joined us again.
Oh, good.
Isaac, maybe we can ask Isaac to take over from the next slide.
Yes, sorry, Isaac, I've continued in your absence, but I was just coming to the bit on pests. If you wanted to talk that, I'll shut up now.
Thank you both for being, moving between each other. Yes, so next slide. Here we go. Isaac? Colin, I'm not sure that Isaac's audio is working.
I can continue. I'd much rather it was Isaac because he's there on the ground doing the work. I'm just talking, but I will take over because I don't want any of you on this school to waste any time.
No, Colin, please continue, I think, and then maybe Isaac can join us when we're having a discussion.
Yes, okay. So you will see on that screen there that we've got three really interesting results. Crop yield increase, we'll talk about that and you'll see some graphs later. And that goes without saying, if we think we've got a really good method of farming, if we didn't have crop yield increase, you'd be questioning that. So that will come. The interesting thing is, unexpectedly to us, after our soil becomes improved from using compost and mulches, I haven't talked much about mulches, but I will, we've found that a particular weed, which is a nasty one, we call it the witchweed or it's called witchweed in Malawi. I don't know whether you have a similar name for it in the countries where you're sitting at the moment. But what we have found completely by surprise is that witchweed infestation doesn't happen. It's quite incredible. So that was a bonus we didn't realize. And we think, but of course we haven't done the technical research, we think that's because witchweed does well in poor soils. And because we're making this soil richer and creating red cross, the witchweed has trouble. And we're not sure why, we don't know the technology, but it is really noticeable. And the third thing that's happened is how quickly these households improve their livelihoods on a whole range of not just more food, but how they change their the way their livelihoods work. They find they've got a little bit of spare money that they can pay for their children's education or get some corrugated iron for their roof. Those sort of things make a huge difference, as you will know, out in the country there where life is pretty hard and you're pretty close to nature. So those three things are the meaningful changes that deep bed farming brings, and it is why we have about 21,000 farmers and thousands clamoring for training now. So the important thing that you should know is that we do not go into a community and say, hey, come and do our system of farming, it's great. We only react to requests. A community requests us. So that is really important, because that we'll come on to that in a moment when we talk about the sociology of deep bed farming. We could have the next slide, please, Minnie. Okay, so this was a controlled experiment with a small group of farmers, and it was an independent research. And you will see that the big blue is they were comparing, each farmer had a plot of deep bed and a plot that they had been doing traditionally. And this is the result in the first year. What you're also seeing is an extraordinary level of yield. In fact, it's hard to believe that Staffel got 11,500 or 11.5 tons per hectare on his plot. You might take out the worst and the least, the worst and the best, but all the same, the average dried maize yield in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, and Malawi is it varies, but it's between 2 and 3 tons per hectare of dried maize yield. So these yields are quite extraordinary. They're, up to 10 tons, I guess. The 11.5 tons seems to be an awful lot, but it may, these were the results that came from site. So that's the main reason why farmers come to us and say, can we please be trained in deep bed farming? Because there are some key things in deep bed farming that it's hard to just pick up by chatting. And one of them is setting the contour ridge, which we talked about earlier, or Isaac talked about. The contour ridge has to be on the contour. And to do that, you have to do quite technical surveying. We use a line level and a string and a whole string of people to get that exactly on the contour line. If you're 1% out and you've got a 100-meter contour, you've got a meter of water standing one end and nothing the other. And of course, I've lost my slide, Minnie.
Give me a minute. There was a glitch from this side. I'll put you in the share. What we could possibly do is, once you've covered the bulk of it, say around 10 to, we could start the discussion, and there are lots of questions already, I can see.
Okay.
So
I'll finish it very quickly then.
Got another 5, 6 minutes, yes. Can you see the slide now?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
And this is which weeds in beds. Anyway, this shows the falling of witch weeds in deep beds. It shows the difference. But we can move on to the next one because I've already talked about weeds. Food security over the years, and this is a graph showing people using deep bed farming, how their food security improves over the years. If you could take the slide down a little bit further, we've got the date, that's it. So you can see that after 6 years, there are no farmers who are severely insecure for food, none at all. And the effect of that, the deep bed farming results in the blue line, which is security, how it rises over the years. And the reason it rises over the years is because they start off with a 10 or 10 by 20 meter plot, and that changes their lives a bit, but it takes a few years for them to extend it to all their land. So it's not just it's taking a long time to become healthy, it's because they're increasing the amount of land they have each year in deep bed farming. Okay, next slide, please. This is really important, this slide, and I cannot overstress it. Deep bed farming, and I would suggest any farming method, has 3 elements. The physical features, in our case, the created of the box ridges and the flat-topped beds and the marker ridges and the baffles between them. The biological features, which is the composting and the mulching. No soil should be exposed to the sky. That's not how it is in nature. It should be mulched. That does a whole lot of things. I'm sure you realize keeps the moisture in the soil, keeps the soil a bit cooler, and obviously encourages microorganisms as well, and decomposes into a compost. But the thing that we probably got wrong in the early years is we didn't realize the extent to which sociological features must be included in anything working with groups of people. It's obvious, but what we didn't realize was that we needed to focus on getting the sociological features right. If you don't have all those 3 in a system, I would suggest you don't have a system that works. Our sociological element of deep bed farming is the secret, and we have to thank Isaac and his team very strongly for this, because they came up with this idea. We used to have a centralized demonstration bed in a village, and that was creating sociological problems. They changed that to when a group of farmers is being trained, the training happens on everyone's farm. They move from farm to farm in different parts of the training so that all the farmers get to see the other people's farms. They all feel they've done work, the same amount of work. They've shared best practice and they've seen challenges of other farmers. Absolute common sense when you say it like that, but a vital part of deep bed farming, and the hardest one to transfer to other organizations. If you're a top-down organization, it's going to be very hard for you to go into a community and say, we are working with you, we're not above you, we're working with you, we want to hear what you've got to say, you question us, we'll work this out together. Next slide, please. There we are, our long-term goal. It's a big one. So I guess there are 40 million smallholder farmers, and you know, although it can be mechanized, our focus has been on smallholder farmers. They are the root and branch of Malawi and many other countries. We think this is so successful and such a no-brainer that we would like other organizations to take it to their countries and see the effects and spread it all over sub-Saharan Africa. There may be places where for some reason it doesn't work, but I can't think of those things. Perhaps there's a sociological thing where all the land is owned by one landowner and it's rented, which we found elsewhere in the world. But we need to find organizations that are like-minded, that are not top-down for a start, that haven't got a feeling of their own self-importance, are putting the importance into the smallholder. They're the important people, not us. And an ability to spread that around together with raising enough finance to pay for things like pickaxes, because you've got to break the hardpan very often with a pickaxe, and a farmer won't normally have a pickaxe. So we have to, we provide an awful lot of pickaxes around, those sort of things, line levels and so on. So, and of course, the training of other organizations is not expensive, but it costs money because it takes labor and it takes travel costs as well. So I'm not sure if there's another slide, is there?
That's the last slide, Colin.
Okay, so if Isaac's on, then he will answer questions. If not, I'm more than happy to, if I can.
So first of all, Colin, thank you very much for stepping in for Isaac and the rest of your team. That was a very good overview of the deep bed farming method. And there are, as I can see in the chat, there are lots and lots of questions. My suggestion is, since we are having connectivity challenges today, that you and your team, so there's Colin, I think Alex is also here, and Isaac comes and goes. So anybody, and Ian I can see, anybody from the team who wants to answer the questions and join the discussion, do please feel free to do so. So we could start looking at the questions already, and there are questions in the chat, there are discussion points in the chat, and if you want to ask it yourself, do raise your hand and we'll let you open the floor. So maybe the first one there is Busisiwe. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, good day, everyone. That has been a very good presentation. Thank you so much from Malawi. And what I would like to know, because they are talking of soil fertility, and which is very much important to build that soil. So how are they doing it using those principles of diversity, no monocropping, and what seed are they using? Are they using OPV seeds, hybrids, or GMOs? And what are they using for crop rotation and things like that, so that then they can maintain the soil fertility? Because I understand if you're using synthetic fertilizers, then that is eating up the soil. It's not growing that soil, and things like GM seeds. Thank you.
I mean, you're talking about a huge subject here, and of course, all your questions, all the elements of that question are very, very relevant. So we talk about crop rotations and mixed cropping and cover cropping and green manure cropping. They're all part of what we do. I can't go into the detail because I'll be here for 3-4 hours answering that, but you're absolutely right. The use of synthetic fertilizers breaks the contract between, if you can call it that, the contract between the roots of your crop and the soil with its microorganisms. So breaking that contract is a very dangerous thing that we do. Making soils healthy means reconnecting the soil, making the soil healthy enough to reconnect with the roots. And that has a whole load of measures, including good mix of compost. Now, there are many different sorts of compost. We have 2 or 3 recipes we regularly use, and rather than looking at them scientifically, which we could do, these have been used for years and found to be successful. So farmers choose the method of composting. And of course, composting means you don't need artificial chemicals. What they do, farmers, is they use a little bit of artificial chemicals. We have to, they wean themselves off it, because they realize they don't have to spend money on expensive fertilizers. So probably they reduce it in the first year, and after 2 or 3 years, they've stopped using it because it's a waste of money, when they can perfectly easily spend the time they would have spent digging on making compost. That's probably not answered all the many questions you asked, Mrs. Way, but it's answered some of them, I hope.
And more will come out as the discussion and questions go further. I see a question, Mariana, I can see your hand up, but there's a question, we'll do a mix and match. A question in the chat from Sabine. I see that you're planting on the bumps, but are you also planting in the furrows themselves, or just putting mulch and compost inside them?
Once again, excellent question. You've noticed something, two things. We haven't in those slides shown that underneath the crops, we grow green manure cover crops as much as we can. So we don't tend to plant them actually in the furrows. The furrows are used for walking, so there is a bit of compaction there, but the green manure cover crops we plant underneath the main crops spread into those furrows. So, but the main crop, that is the crop that we harvest the yield for, is basically in the flat-topped beds. There are some seeds we get from green manure cover crops, as you can imagine, but that, so the furrows are not normally planted, no.
So there's a follow-on question with that. How do you prevent the raised beds from collapsing during heavy rains?
Well, excellent question. They don't collapse, that's not, but there is a little bit runoff from the flat top, and that's why we say we like a flat top, because the beds are quite fluffed up. They're quite absorbent. So, but heavy rain, what happens is it will beat the surface, and a little bit of soil will run down into the furrows. And every year they will go along their furrows and just flick up any soil and sediment that's come down into the furrows in the dry season. They'll pop it up on top. It's not a big job, but it is an important job, probably not in the first year, but the second and third years, they might have to do that. But remember, those beds never get stepped on, so they're not going to be compacted, so they are going to remain absorbent.
Right, so a comment from Never, and then Mariana, I'll ask you to unmute yourself. Never says it seems very laborious, especially for women and children, digging those many trenches during heavy rains. Water overflows the furrows and would flood the whole field. Would anybody from your team like to respond to that, or?
Yeah. Yes, it shouldn't just be me. Yeah. Is there anyone else from Tiyeni? Oh, there's Isaac.
I can talk. I can respond. It's not that it is laborious, because of course women or anyone else is encouraged to break the hardpan when the soils are still soft and when the weather is still cool, like soon after harvest, in April, May, June. Here in Malawi we have very cool weather, but it is also the time when soils are easy to work with, so they can dig large portions of land without having difficulties. So that is the time we encourage them to make to prepare their fields.
Thank you, Isaac.
So actually, many of them are also saying that DBF is labor saving, because they are talking of doing this, breaking the hardpan once, and all the years of cultivation they don't do that anymore. So overall, it is a labor saving technology.
Thank you. Mariana, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Mini. Thank you, Isaac and Colin, for your presentation. Really very, very clear and well structured. So thank you for this. You've highlighted deep bed farming as a package of climate smart agriculture practice and technology to break compacted soil while improving water harvesting. About climate smart agriculture, I'd like to stress a bit more this point, if you allow me. So it's known that climate smart agriculture is an opportunity to address challenges, interlinked challenges as food security and climate change. You demonstrated very well to what extent this helps to transform agri-food systems towards resilient practice. My point is, when we think about agroecology as a holistic and integrated approach, it's not only about good practice, but it's also a social movement locally. And you've also mentioned how vital sociological features are for this process. So I'd like to ask you, in your point of view, or according to your experience, how to adapt and relate it to local farmers' knowledge, priorities, and requirements? Or I mean, how to, according to your experience, how to approach climate smart agriculture at field level? If you could explain a bit more about this. Thank you.
Go ahead, Isaac, Colin, anybody else?
Yeah, we have France here who will respond. A colleague.
France is our monitoring and evaluation officer, and very highly qualified in that. Over to him.
Thank you, Colin, for introducing me. If we talk of climate smart agriculture, yes, we are answering the climate part of it, if I may start from there. So we talk of maintaining water in the ground and reducing erosion. And now we include agroforestry, which is a part of reducing heat on the soil. We do mulching. So only the social part, the sociological part and the ecological part, deep bed farming is actually a climate smart agriculture, which is adapting all those into deep bed, because we are talking of intercropping, which intercrops crops which are staples, and also crops which are for climate of which are more or less perennial in the field. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. Maybe you may need to rephrase a bit if I didn't answer it.
Anybody else would like to add?
Can I come in as an agroecology farmer?
Busisiwe? Yes, please do.
Yes, I think the way they are doing this DBF is really, it is following the principles of agroecology, even though it is termed as a technology of climate smart agriculture. But I see a lot of agroecology there because there's intercropping, there's mulching, there's crop rotation, there's soil fertility building, and there's also that social aspect where we are stressing the choice of food that the farmers can grow. Then that goes well with agroecology, because then if they are growing that food according to their culture, using their own seed, and they being able to save the seed so that then they don't go and buy seed every now and then, that is making profit for them. And then because now, again, this is a large space, they are able to do it economically, looking at selling the surplus. They are eating and selling the surplus so that then they are also a commercial and building their livelihood, as we saw on the graph there. Thank you.
Thank you, Busisiwe. John.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great answer from Busisiwe. For me, the term climate smart is a misnomer at the beginning there. I suspect it's to do with the government link and working with government, because governments like the term climate smart agriculture. But those within the agroecological field do have a problem with it, because it does have a reputation of being a term used by corporates, for example, to kind of justify a little bit of tinkering, a little sort of reduction in use of chemical fertilizers is sort of termed as now we're being climate smart and so on. So it's something for Tiyeni to think about in terms of how you refer to it. To me, what you're doing is more agroecological than climate smart. I just wanted to, I had my hand up for another question, and that was livestock, and how certainly here in Zimbabwe, livestock could do a lot of damage to those raised beds during the dry season. I don't know how that's being handled in the Malawi situation.
Well, in Malawi, I should first of all thank you for the responses that you have helped us with. However, I just want to respond to the question on livestock. We are working with communities and under the leadership of the local leadership, that is. So as we are managing this person scheme, the local leaders are also able to help us.
Isaac, you've muted yourself.
What to do with the livestock. Sorry for interruptions, there are phone calls. But as we administer the person scheme, local leaders are leading the process as they make sure that beneficiaries of the scheme are identified well in advance, and they are put in place measures to prevent other livestock stepping on deep beds by putting bylaws which prevent anyone to just let the livestock roam about. So this is how we are doing it. We work with local structures as well. And government is also in the lead to make sure that it guides the population who are adopting DBEF to make sure that they are not destroyed anymore by livestock.
Could I break in there?
Yes, please.
We haven't explained in our presentation that a key part of our compost is animal dung. And we have what we started with a pig pass-on program, but now is an animal pass-on program, because there are some Islamic communities, and obviously pigs are not right for them. So they do a pass-on program where a farmer gets given either a cow, a piglet, or a young goat, female, and then they pass on the progeny of that to others. The aim of it, of course, is for dung rather than for meat, although there's inevitably going to be some meat eaten at some stage. But a key part of that is that animal will not be provided for the farmer until they have built a cola, that's what it's called in Malawi, a house, and those animals are not free-ranging. If they were, the question from John is absolutely right, that there's terrible damage could be done to deep bed farming with livestock running across it. And in one case, we've got a community where they've passed a bylaw now. In Kanakukulu, they passed a bylaw that all animals will be tethered. So the community has decided how to deal with that. I'm sorry, Isaac, you probably didn't realize I hadn't mentioned the pig pass-on program or the goat pass-on program.
Great.
Yes, it's okay.
So I have a question from Peter. Peter, would you like me to read it out, or would you like to verbally ask the question yourself? If so, you have to unmute.
Yes, I was interested in I think the question's already been answered, Minnie. It's about the bunds that have been established for the first year in the establishing ridges and then the tide ridges. Do they not need maintenance? Even though you don't walk on them, they would erode over time with the falling of the rain, even with mulch. And then something I haven't written in the chat, which is that at least here in the drylands in West Africa, a sort of a crust, like with 6 months of no rain at all and the sun beating down, the soil tends to crust up. And I'm wondering if that doesn't happen also in Malawi. And what do you do to maintain a pliable soil structure? I know you say it stays loose, but I just don't see how the elements allow that, even under mulch, and whether the mulch can last the whole year. Here it doesn't. No matter how much mulch you put on, it all disintegrates between animals and just the biological degradation by the sun over a couple of months of no rain. So I was just wondering if you could comment briefly on those issues.
Yeah, soil hardening again is possible if the beds are not well managed, or even under natural conditions, soils are bound to harden. But what we do and encourage our farmers here is that they have to apply a lot of compost manure to make sure that the soils are, maintaining their softness. And then even mulching is also provided to make sure that, moisture is kept in the soil for long. Otherwise, the life of the bed to be productive or to remain productive depends on how the farmer manages that bed, that field. That's why we promote also raised footpath across the field, so that the farmer can only use the raised footpaths that prevent soil erosion, other than the sunken footpaths would promote erosion. So the farmer is using those raised footpaths to crisscross his field as he's working, but at the same time preventing recompaction of the soils in bed. However, under natural conditions, if in case the bed hardens or the surface hardens again, we encourage the farmers to just disturb where they are going to plant only. And as soon as they do that, they apply manure again and plant their seed, knowing for sure that the hardpan is already broken. So the development of crops is quite just as good as when you are using fresh beds.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions on mechanization and the tools. So one is asking, for the breaking of the hard pans, what is used, a subsoiler or a four-wheel tractor? And what is the mechanized tool to make the basin and the deep bed? Basically same thing. Is it a tractor? Could you comment on that, please?
In the slide that you saw on the beds, we used tractor just as a demonstration to make sure that the people who are already in mechanization should not be worried to adopt deep bed. Otherwise, the purpose of breaking the hardpan is to make sure that we configure the surface of the land to create furrows for harvesting water, and then the beds for planting. And the farmer uses the furrows to step on when weeding and doing other field operations. So whether one is using a handle hoe or a small tractor for breaking the hardpan, the purpose is to configure the surface. Now, maybe reapers are being promoted elsewhere, but the reaper will not break the hardpan and make it even, so that we can promote construction of beds along contours, because of the reapers just break the hardpan without making the soil ready for making deep beds. So the plow is used once, and we emphasize that the use of a plow should only be once, and then it is actually pushed aside to prepare the field for its natural productivity to take place.
So I guess a related question is, what is the cost of putting the DBF system per acre?
Of course, that would depend on which approach you use. Otherwise, we had there was a slide which I took off, but it was talking of the economic benefit of deep bed, and the cost was far much lower than the rest. In fact, we were comparing the conventional ridge and the pit planting over a period of time. And the cost benefit, the economic benefit from deep bed farming was more than 2 million Malawi kwacha, compared to the ridges, which were like the boxed ridges were 1.5. I'm just retrieving it from my memory, so the actual figures can be shared. But it was indicated, this was done by government, so it was indicated that DBF as a system is far much beneficial to the existing systems, and that as such it was approved by government to say this is beneficial to the farmer. So the farmer almost doubled the benefits if we are practicing conventional ridge at first and moved to DBF.
There is a simple figure as well, which Isaac told me some time ago, which is that the average ridge farmer moves about 650 tons of soil per hectare when they're digging each year. And the deep bed farming moves about 1,100 tons, but it only does it in the first year. So you can make your own maths up in terms of labor cost by saying, well, let's say over 5 years, the ridge method is over 30 tons per hectare moving, but the deep bed farming is only that 1.1 tons over the 5 years, because you only do it in the first year. Of course, subject to that little bit of maintenance that's been referred to before that needs to happen after 2 or 3 years, depending on rainfall and how it's been treated. Sorry, Isaac, I just thought I'd add that.
Yeah,
no, that's a good addition, which I forgot. Thank you very much.
And you're right. It is a ballpark figure. It'll be different depending on how on the soil, on the country, on the region, etc. So that's just as an indicative. Chris has his hand up. Chris from Kenya, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you very much for the good presentation. A real eye opener for me. I work for an organization called World Neighbors, and we have chosen Malawi as the 6th country in Africa where we want to do development work. But we are going to work in the southern region. I can see that your work is mainly in the north. So two short questions. One is how I can connect with the presenters today. I plan to come down there in August to continue with the exploration in the southern region. But my second question is the rate at which this technology has been adopted within Malawi. Is it concentrated mainly in the north, or has it spread to other regions in Malawi? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. Tiyeni is working not only in the north. We may have the largest population of farmers in the north, yes, because that's where we are based. But we have projects across the country, and we have one big project in the south, taking the whole district, Mulanje, and I'm not sure where you will be working or where your interest is. Otherwise, we have project activities taking place in Mulanje as well. Even in Central Region, we are there. In the Lake District of Mangochi and in the capital district of Lilongwe, we are all there with big projects. Yeah, and in the hotspot, actually, we have our strategic direction that we are focusing on the hotspots, and we have one big hotspot in each region. In the southern region, Mulanje is our hotspot area. In the central region is Lilongwe, and in the northern region is Mzimba North.
Also,
could I just explain that a hotspot is an area where we've identified huge demand for deep bed farming, and we want to hit that critical mass in terms of collection of water and percolation, so that whole regions that adopt the method of deep bed farming benefit not just the farmers because of what happens to water. So our plan was these 3 super hotspots reasonably near the main administrative centers of Malawi, one in the south, one in the center, one in the north.
Yeah,
thanks,
maybe
Colin.
to add a bit on that. This time we have also intensified our approach to approach the whole village. So in addition to the decentralized deep bed garden, which Colin explained earlier on, we are now approaching the whole village to make sure that the whole catchment is now harvesting water and allowing this water to percolate other than getting lost and causing havoc in the streams. So I just wanted to add that in all our hotspot areas, that is now our approach to make sure that the whole catchment is conserved.
Thanks, Isaac. I also want to add here, there are requests for connections between each other. So part of our attempt with this forum is that if you want to connect with each other, connect with the presenters or the community or the methods or the organization, do please feel free to exchange emails, websites, etc., so that you can further your connections and take the work forward. You can put them in the chat, and anybody who's new to this Water School Forum and want to be part of it in the future or attend more events or connect with any of the presenters or communities, do put in your emails, and we'll make sure that those connections do happen, and of course directly as well. So we're now coming closer to the end of the session. Are there any further questions that anybody has for the team from Tiyeni? The connectivity is better now, so we have them all here. You have their undivided attention.
Yeah, it's not a question for me. It would just be a comment. And I have a farmer called Peter Kanye from Malawi, but I'm not sure which region, who does permaculture and is very much instrumental in training. So I will tell him about today's webinar, and I would ask him to join hands with all Colin and Isaac and the others, because he's also doing a great job. He is an ecological organic agriculture leader in Malawi, who's representing Malawi, who was trained together with me as a South African and together with other Zambians by IFOAM UK as ecological organic agriculture leaders. So thank you so much for this webinar. Then we will be networking a lot, and yeah, thanks.
We'll also be putting the recording and the presentation up on waterways.world/Africa after the session's over within a day or so. So anybody who wants to refer back to something they've missed in the presentation or something they heard in the discussion which you'd like to hear again, or know who to connect with, it'll be up for you. We'll send an email around when it's up for you to know that it's there, and so all the information will be available. There are also previous presentations, etc., previous methods that groups have presented, also available on the same page. Anybody else? Any comments that you'd like to add as in the closing part of the session, or any further questions?
I put my email address on the chat, and I've also put the website on the chat, and I've now just put Isaac's email address in Malawi on the chat. So delighted to deal with any of your questions personally, I'm sure, and any connections. If you're a like-minded organization who puts the farmer at the same level as you, then we would be delighted to talk to you.
John, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, great. So thanks so much to Tiyeni colleagues. That was a really interesting, thought-provoking presentation. I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think the point is, for me, is that you've found a way within that context that's working, and it's working for farmers. And I think that's great. I mean, different contexts have to find different ways. I mean, there are practices here in Zimbabwe, for example, where people are using mobile crawls through the cropping fields, and that's working quite well. And that where those are situations where you can't tether livestock. It's not practical, it's not realistic. So I think it's all about finding solutions for particular situations. And I'm full of admiration for the work that you're doing in Malawi, which is quite a densely populated country. And I think it lends itself well to things like tethering livestock and to the deep bed farming. And it was, as I said in an email circulating an announcement for this call, we're having an interesting exchange with the natural farming program in Andhra Pradesh. And in that process, we've been looking at the sort of principles of natural farming that they use there. and African organizations have been responding in terms of how can we put these principles into practice. And what was interesting that came through really strongly is that the zero-till minimum tillage is one of the most difficult things for farmers to stop across the continent. And it's so clear now, particularly I was just sharing with Minnie before the call, that in seasonal rainfall environments where you have long dry seasons, if you do till every year, it's very difficult. You can keep producing a crop by putting manure or whatever you put on, but it's very difficult to improve the fertility and the quality of the soil if you're tilling. There was excellent research done on that in Zimbabwe in the sort of late 80s and early 90s. And it's very clear how quickly the organic matter drops if you're tilling. So but it's not easy. It's difficult. But I think Tiyeni have dealt with that difficulty, struggled with it, taken a number of years and found a method that's working for them in their context. And so hats off to them. It's really great. And thanks so much for sharing with us. And we look forward to lots more contact with you. So thank you from the Water School Africa.
Yes, I'll just echo what John is saying. Yes, Isaac, please.
Yeah, I'm saying from here, we really appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation. We'd not take it for granted because many participants to this webinar left out very important things just to interact with us. So it's a thanks to them. But we are looking forward to further interactions. And if at all there is need to be invited to Malawi, and then you will see our farmers and interact with them, we welcome that one. And we are really appreciative of the organizers, including us into this network. So thank you very much. And for your information, the deep bed farming has now been authorized by government, and approval certificate was just handed over to us in a couple of days ago. We are really excited, and we see forward to the farmers in Malawi converting their fields to DBF. Thank you.
Well, congratulations. I mean, the way we look at this forum is that it's like a big family. Sometimes there are new members coming in, but the whole attempt with this forum is that we meet people who are doing fantastic work on the ground and increasing the fertility of the soil and holding water in the landscape so that people can have good lives and livelihoods where they live. The work that Tiyeni is doing with the deep bed farming is obviously very relevant to many African contexts, many countries in Africa, and you struck a chord there, because I can see even in the chat so many people would like to connect with you further to see what they can do in their regions. So very, very grateful. In spite of the challenges, the team has risen magnificently to tell us what your work is and what a deep impact it is. And I think everybody's, on behalf of everybody, I'd like to say a huge thank you for covering for each other and for telling us more about your work. And no doubt we'll be in touch with each other and yourselves in the future. So with this, unless there are any last minute burning, yes, Carolyn, do unmute yourself and say something.
Sorry, I was just applauding Tiyeni. I wasn't really putting my hand up.
Right, okay.
But I would just say I've had the privilege of being a very small funder of Tiyeni for several years, and I'm so inspired by the speed with which it's developing now in different parts of Malawi, getting the certificate from government and getting whole community water management. I'll share that with the other people in our trust, and I just wanted to thank Colin and Isaac and John for having made the connection. And this has been a wonderful event, even though I got the time wrong. So I've only joined for the questions, but I will go back and look at the presentation.
It'll be up very soon, so it'll be there. Emmanuel, your hand is up. Do unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Minnie. So I'm really grateful. I'm really excited about the Malawi DBF initiative. So yeah, it's my first time hearing that in Malawi there are some agroecologists there. We have been working with the people from Zambia, from South Africa, from in Southern Africa. It's our first time as Monde Trust to hear that in Malawi there's some people doing such great work. So I just wanted to comment and compliment the guys. They're doing great work, and we'll be in touch with them. We have noted their emails. So I want to say thank you so much. It was a great presentation.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Go well. Have a good rest of the day, and we'll be in touch again. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating and for making this hour and a half really rich and a good sharing. Bye-bye.